Hi and welcome. My name is Ishaq. In today's video, we will take a closer look at string objects. Python is object-oriented language, which means that we create objects, then we interact with our objects. Sometimes we retrieve information about our objects, or sometimes we modify them. But any object is the instance of a class. You cannot create an object which will have no class. So all the string objects are the instances of class str. All the integers are instances of class int, and so on. You can also create your own classes, about which we will talk in its own video. Now, what are string objects? String is sequence or series of characters enclosed in single or double quotes, and it's a very common object or data type, and is used even in hello world example, which is the simplest Python program. So let's create our string object. Let's say my str is equal to. Now it's your choice whether you use single quotes or double quotes to enclose your string. Well, I prefer single quotes, and this is what most programmers prefer. Let's say Ishaq. But what if my string itself contains the type of quotes that I use to enclose my string? Let's say Ishaq's book. So we will encounter syntax error if we run our this code, because up to that point it's a valid Python code, but the rest of line became invalid. So to solve out this problem, we will enclose our string in the other type of quotes from the one which is in the content of our string. Let's run our code and we will not see any error, and it worked. But this solution will fail if my string contains both types of quotes. For example, Ishaq's 43 number. So for this, we will use triple, single, or double quotes to enclose our string. In this way, you can safely create such strings. Let's run our code, and it worked. But you can do it in another way, which is to escape all these meaningful or special characters by adding backslashes before these characters. In this way, you can also keep your style. So if we rerun our code, we will see the same result. So that was how you can create string objects and how you can deal with such cases. Now let's interact with my str by calling its methods. What are methods? Methods are functions, but they are called by objects, and each class of objects can have its own methods. The syntax of how to use methods is same as functions, and purpose of methods is also the same. But to call a method of an object, you need to add a period sign. Then any method name the class of object has. So in this case, I will say len. So this line will return the length of my str. How many characters are there in my str string? But first, let's make this string simple. Ishaq Khan. Now let's run our code, and we get 10. So 10 is the number of characters my str has. Now let's get more information about my str. We'll say print my str dot is lower and my str dot is upper. and at last my str dot is title. And now let's run our code. The first method returned 10. If you look at its name, it's starting and ending with double underscores. What does it symbolize? It symbolizes that these methods are not intended to be called by the programmers, and these are called internally by the interpreter whenever it needs. But you can still call them as normally as you call other functions. So the second method is lower return false boolean value, which means that Ishaq Khan is not in lowercase, and this method returns false if even a single character in a string is in uppercase, and its upper method also returned false, and its upper does the opposite what is lower does, and its title return true boolean value because our mystr is for sure in its title case. Now let's modify our string. Remember the concept of mutable and immutable objects. Mutable objects are those objects which can be changed in its place or modified in its place, while immutable objects are those objects which cannot be changed in its place. And string is the example of immutable object. But to modify an immutable object, a copy is created during modification and original object is left untouched. So let's call a function of mystr which seemingly modifies it to understand the concept of how an immutable object is modified. So we will run our this code and we got a modified mystr. But if we again print our mystr, we will find that it is left untouched. Run our code and we find that the Ishaq Khan is actually not changed. Now what is happening in the line 4 is that new object is created which is independent of mystr. This is just like if there is another string object of this data. So now this string has no connection with mystr. So this is how an immutable object is modified, which is actually a new object is created. String objects can also be modified or created by some mathematical operators, for example using an addition operator. Mystr plus, for example, programmer. So what the addition operator do is that it will concatenate two strings. So let's run our code to see the result, and it concatenated these two strings. You can also use multiplication operator to repeat the string how many times you want. For multiplication we use asterisk sign, then any numerical number, for example 5. So mystr will be repeated 5 times. So let's run our code and we got the expected result. Now if we again print our mystr, so we will find it untouched. Run our code and we find that mystr is actually not modified because the same happened again, which is that new objects were created. Now what is happening behind the scene is that this line calls my str add method, and this programmer string is passed as parameter, and this line 5 actually calls my str mul method, which is short for multiplication, and this 5 is passed as parameter. Now if we run our code, we will find the same result. So let's run our code, and we find the same result. So that was how you can create string objects and how you can work with them. There are still few topics with relation to string objects to learn about, which we will talk in its own videos. So that was our end of video. I hope you enjoyed. See you next time. Bye bye.